Hey guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing okay. My name is Jen Grieves, and if you're new here, this channel is all about trying to figure out life living with type 1 diabetes and all that living with a chronic condition entails, which doesn't sound like that much fun for a YouTube channel, but we do have fun around here, I promise. This isn't tea, this is wine, you know? So today, for a change, I thought we'd keep it a bit looser, kind of unscripted, and just have a chat because, as you've probably guessed from the title of this video, last week was a bit of a show when it came to my type 1 diabetes and my blood sugars, which wasn't a lot of fun, but does happen and is no one's fault when it does happen. So I thought it might be quite nice to just get comfy. I'm on the sofa today and yeah, have kind of a riffy chat to myself. Is that a thing? I don't know. This isn't going to be a negative video. I'm a very optimistic and hopeful person, and for the most part I really do feel like I get to live the life I want to live and do the things I want to do. Type 1 diabetes definitely makes things more complicated sometimes, or requires a lot more planning on occasion. Last week I felt chronically ill, which sounds ridiculous because it's a chronic illness, so by definition I am chronically ill, but there's definitely a difference in existing with a medical condition and having it get in the way of your life. And last week it affected my personality, my interactions, my productivity, and my general well-being. So basically what happened was it got hot. Now, for people outside of type 1 diabetes circles, they'll be like, huh? People within type 1 diabetes circles completely understand that a change in temperature and a change in the weather can drastically affect your blood sugar levels. That being said, I work in hot countries many months of the year. It's part of my job as a digital producer, and I've never had this happen. I got hit with the most intense, long-lasting hypos I've ever experienced in 24 years. That weather came, it gate crashed, it really took over, and I was floored. I don't know if it was just the weather or the weather plus a combination of other factors, but I know a lot of people within the type 1 community that I spoke to were having a similar experience. I don't know why I'm getting so flustered already. Look forward to me getting redder as this story progresses. So on Monday last week, over the course of the day, I think I had around 3 episodes where my blood sugars dipped. And I say dipped instead of full-blown hypo because it wasn't dramatic. They were just blood sugars on the lower end of the scale, and they were ones that I could treat as normal. They didn't feel significant to me. They didn't feel dramatic, so I didn't really pay that much attention. Blood sugars go up and down all day long. That's what happens, whatever. It gets to Monday night and I go to bed, obviously. Around 3 a.m. I think, I wake up and my blood sugar's low. My Dexcom alarm wakes me up. So I get up and have some juice. Juice is my normal hypo fix, and it doesn't take a lot for me to get my blood sugars back up normally. So I get back into bed, and half an hour later I'm still awake and my blood sugar is still reading low. My alarm is intermittently going off because it's dipping back into normal range and then dipping back low again. So I'm like, what's going on here? I have more juice, and I'm convinced at this point that I've obviously overcorrected and I'm gonna bounce way back up the other way into a high blood sugar. And at this point I start to generally get a bit annoyed because I know that means that the alarm is then going to go off again, and I really rely on sleep. I've said it loads, but over the years I've come to realize that sleep really is the foundation for me of stable blood sugars, of being able to figure out my life with type 1 diabetes and feel better equipped for all the decisions I have to make that surround my type 1 diabetes, and just to manage my day-to-day outlook, productivity, perspective. It keeps me positive. I've just come to realize that sleep's really important. So in all of this, I'm starting to realize that I'm not gonna get a very good night's sleep. I'm still laying awake and my blood sugar just doesn't come up. So I've had more juice and I find some sweets in the cupboard. That does the trick and my blood sugars start to go up. I'm like, cool. I wake up the next morning, I wake up early. My blood sugars are slightly high. I think they were around 11 or 12, which I fully expected. I actually fully expected them to be a lot worse. I feel quite tired, but to me, it was just a weird night. It was just one night at that point. For my lunch, I had a sweet potato and baked beans, which is double carb. Have that. I'm convinced I'm going to spike up wildly high from that. I set out for my daily walk and my blood sugar just doesn't move. I'm on this walk. I keep looking at my Dexcom because I'm waiting for that blood sugar spike post-meal and it just doesn't come. And then I realise about 20-25 minutes into this walk that my blood sugar is probably going to start dropping because I'm walking. I can just sense it. You know when you know, and in hindsight you're like, why did I do that? And I know why I had my insulin, because I counted my carbohydrates out like a good little diabetic, which I cannot promise I always do. But my blood sugar does start to dip, so I'm like, right, fine, I will have something sweet. And I was carrying a raw paleo bar. It's like a cereal bar, but it's got no cereals in it. It's kind of nuts and dates and things. So it's got fats in it, yes, but it's got sugar in it too. And I'm not actually hypo at this point, so I'm like, if I have that, maybe that'll bump me up. Fixing a hypo for me, it doesn't take a lot for me to then bounce up the other way. So I have this cereal bar and I think, okay, well that'll probably sort me out because that's like 15 grams of carbs. I'm not even a hypo. I'm sure I'll be fine. Half an hour later, I get back from my walk and I am dropping into a hypo. So I have a full carton of juice. On we go. I know I'm tired and I know that it's hot. I am becoming aware that it's hot at this point and that might be having an impact on my blood sugars. Go to bed on Tuesday night. Really want a good night's sleep because the last night was a bit rough. 2 a.m. comes, the alarm goes off again. And I'm like, what? So I go and treat the hypo. I glug down the juice this time and I'm kind of still expecting that to work in 5 or 10 minutes, do its thing, and for me to be on my way back to Snoozeville. No. This time I'm awake for 3 hours. And I have more and more juice, convinced again that this is going to push me way up the other way. Like, it's biomedical science. I'm not a biomedical scientist, but if I'm intaking glucose, surely that glucose is going to have an effect and my blood sugars are going to rise because my pancreas cannot produce insulin. What is happening? I'm just sat there staring at the Dexcom like a maniac, waiting for my blood sugar to rise. Just doesn't happen. I start getting my finger prick test out because I'm convinced that something must be going on and maybe it's the Dexcom having a moment, but no, my blood sugar is still low. So I go and get some cereal and some milk and I'm sat there in the middle of the night munching away on this cereal, which I hate because I'm half asleep and I don't want food and it's not meal times. I'm not enjoying the food. It's just a means to an end. 3 hours later, I am still low. So I'm awake, and it's at this point I start to consider whether I'm safe living on my own, not knowing if I can go back to sleep. I'm just like, does someone else need to be around me? Because I don't know what's going to happen to me, and if I do pass out, there's nobody here. No one's going to know for hours. These sorts of thoughts never cross my mind. I'm very independent. I've lived with this thing long enough. I've been on my own long enough. I spent many nights on my own in hotel rooms when I'm away for work. It's just not something I think it's helpful to dwell on, nor is it something I genuinely feel. I'm just living my life doing what I can. But in the dead of night, in the middle of a global pandemic, 3 hours into a hypo, I just start to question things. I've never had a hypo in my life that's lasted 3 hours, particularly not one that's been treated with sweets, juice, and cereal. I don't know. Anyway, I can see that my blood sugars start to rise, so I'm like, okay, go to sleep. I don't turn the Dexcom off. 2 hours later, and I get an alarm, and I'm sky high. Of course, I've rocketed because I've had all of that sugar and no insulin. Wednesday comes, and I feel like a hot mess. I'm just super tired. I'm super weary. I feel quite sick because of all the sugar that I had to ingest, and obviously when you're hypo, you eat quite quickly. As I said, it was a means to an end. I wasn't there savoring the flavors. There's just this sugar carnage littered all over my bedroom floor, and it just doesn't make me feel great. You know, I don't feel great about the situation that I'm in starting off my day. But I have to say, and I have to stress, that my mood, in terms of my general mood, is quite good. I'm just a bit weary of it and annoyed at it. I have a podcast to record that day. and I can hear it in my voice. I'm just not on it. I'm not coming back with the right questions. I'm trying to interpret what they're saying and resonate and respond, and I just cannot get my words out. I feel like I'm all over the place, and I hate that. I hate that it started to get in the way of my life and things that I care about. But what can you do? Life goes on, and you don't want to let people down. I think I had a higher carb meal before I went to bed to try and stop a repeat night, and I definitely turned a temp basal on that was reduced before I went to bed. So I reduced my temp basal for a number of hours over that same period where I'd noticed that I was dropping low, and I did have an okay night that night, I think, because I feel like Thursday was a lot better and I was really happy. But then Thursday night came and it happened again. I put on reduced basals. I think I ate a high carb meal, I'm sure I did. And then I had the third night of extended hypos. And it was just rubbish. It was just rubbish. I've been over it. You know how I felt. You know what happened. It's just like, this feels now out of my control. I feel like I'm doing everything I know that I should be doing. I'm doing everything I can, and it's not working, and now I'm not safe. And again, those vulnerabilities just crept in, and that's the bit that really gets me. Every now and then, type 1 diabetes just exposes our vulnerabilities and shows us how precarious this condition is. It's okay to be vulnerable, I completely get that, and I'm vulnerable with my friends and family a lot of the time. I'm a very open book, but this vulnerability kind of came at me, and it wasn't something I could control. Obviously, that vulnerability went away the next day, and I think it's also to do with the fact that when you're hypo, your brain is literally starved of oxygen. So you don't have the cognizance to rationalize your thoughts in the way that you normally would, which is why a lot of people sound drunk when they're hypo. It's why you scrabble around in the dark and you knock things over and you can't quite figure out what you're meant to be doing. I'm smiling like it's fun. It's not fun, but it is surreal and bizarre and bonkers and ridiculous, and I can appreciate that as I'm sat here at a healthy range talking to the camera to people who I know will understand what it's like to experience a hypo like that. It is such a paradox when you wake up, that's it, you know, it's done, and you've just got this litter as a memory, and the harrowingness of it all is left in the dead of night with the hypo, with the experience, with everything that's gone on. And I wouldn't want to dwell on it. There's no point. It's not healthy. It's not helpful. You've got to move forward. But there is something so weird about that, experiencing something quite dramatic and then it just all being over, you know? But I think that's the nature of life. That's the nature of a lot of dramatic experiences that we all go through with diabetes and otherwise. I don't want to say that all of this was particularly traumatic or harrowing, because it wasn't. It was just real. It's just part and parcel of living with type 1 diabetes that sometimes these things happen. What I couldn't get my head around was that I didn't have any explanation for it. Normally I can say, oh, I went hypo because of that, or XYZ, I exercised, or I gave myself too much insulin, I miscounted my carbs, I waited too long before I started eating. There's normally some way I can account for it, but this extended periods, nights and nights in a row of these extended hypos that just couldn't be fixed, I had no explanation for them, and the way it just permeated the rest of my life. I didn't want to interact with anyone. I felt like a real sluggy this. I don't know what this is, but that's how I felt, and therefore I just went into myself. I barely spoke to anyone. I just didn't feel like I had anything to offer anyone. I couldn't be bothered to really make myself presentable to go into the outside world. I just felt so crap. I'm not even sure what day we're on at this point, but I knew that whatever was happening wasn't going away. I didn't want to feel unsafe anymore. I didn't want this to keep happening, so I knew I needed to tweak my basal profile a bit more substantially. So I'd been setting temporary basals, which you can do on an insulin pump, but I have basal profiles, which is the drip feed of insulin that you get over the course of a day, and hour to hour you can tweak that amount. And it blew my mind when I first got my insulin pump that 1 hour I can have 0.65 units over the course of that hour, and the next hour I would need 0.75 of a unit, and that would make a difference. Blew my mind. So anyway, before bed that night, I looked at my basal profile and I decided to reduce my insulin from about 11 p.m. to about 5 a.m. by about 15 to 20%. And that's something you can do on an insulin pump. I didn't consult my diabetes team about this, which isn't advised. It's not something I would recommend, but I guess over the years, it's just that intuition again, and having needed to make tweaks before when I'm working in different time zones, or I am in different countries, or I'm on a different routine. I've done it before, and I knew that 15 to 20% was probably a good place to start, and it was over 6 hours of my day, not the whole 24 hours. So I kind of knew that it would be okay, and if it ran high, and I'd rather do that at this point than go low again and risk those long hypos. So that worked, and I'm still on that basal profile now. I've called it hot in here, which is very apt, and I didn't have any hypos that night. I woke up the next day feeling like a new woman. I think I had 9 hours sleep, and I had come back to life essentially, to the point that I then went out on a run, and I obviously had all this stored up energy in me. I hadn't really been moving for the past few days. I was too scared to, and I felt rubbish, so I hadn't really left the house too much. So I went out on this run, and I ended up doing a really long run, and it was glorious. I felt so good. I felt really energetic, and that I felt good on the run, and I ended up going further than I'd planned. Now, when I stopped running a lot of the time, again, this is just from years of doing it in practice and learning how my body works, I sometimes get an increase in my blood sugar once I've stopped the exercise that I'm doing. I get a little spike. So about 15 minutes before I ended my run, I gave myself my lunchtime insulin, because I also have learned through years of practice, and especially at the moment, that I really need to pre-bolus to avoid those post-meal spikes. My Novo Rapid sometimes takes 20-30 minutes to really get working in my body. So I knew, one, that I wanted to eat when I got back, and two, that I normally get a post-exercise spike in my glucose levels. I took some insulin just before I got home to give it a chance to get working and kicking to avoid that spike. I got back and I was, I think, around 9 millimoles per litre. Not low at all, especially not for an hour's run. So I decided to get in the shower to give that insulin a chance to work before I then made my lunch. Have my shower, nice and clean, whatever. Get out of the shower, I come out, and my blood sugar is nearer 11. And I'm like, that's weird. I've definitely got insulin in my system now. Again, who knows what's happening this week? We'll roll. Get ready, start making food, and I just see that my blood sugar isn't coming down. I'm like, what? So I go to look at my insulin pump, and my Omnipod has peeled off my body, but only just. So I, at this point, do not know if I've had my insulin. I do not know if that insulin that I had at the end of my run has gone into my system at all. I don't know if it went out on my skin. I don't know. Just the way that I looked at it, the way that it then was hanging off, the way that I then pulled it out, I wasn't quite sure where the cannula ended and my skin began. So it was kind of still in, but I think maybe only just. And I'm like, now what do I do? And I did laugh. I laughed out loud, because I was just like, are you kidding me? Are you for real? After this week, now you want to try this? Like, really? Really? So I'm sat there like, A, I'm hungry. B, I've started cooking. I've just done an hour's run. Surely, like, things are okay. So I decide to have half the insulin again, because I'm pretty sure it hasn't gone in, but I don't want to have double the insulin in case it has gone in. And I figure that if it has gone in and I'm having an extra insulin, I can just eat to account for that insulin, because I've eaten a truckload of this week at this point. So what's another extra slice of bread or two? So I have half the insulin again, and I try and hold off this lunch a little bit, but I'm just so hungry. I've just run so far, I haven't eaten yet. It's like 2-3 o'clock. So I eat, and my blood sugar goes really, really high, and I'm just thrilled. I just love type 1 diabetes at this point. So that was my week. It was really fun. I don't really have any takeaways from this one. I'm not gonna do a Jenny's final thought on it. I just think one of those weeks really tested me, my patience, my temperament, my body, my mind, everything. But there we go, and I'm laughing, I'm smiling, I'm fine. It's not a tale of woe by any means. As I said, I just think it's important to relay these experiences because as much as I feel like I'm in a good place with my type 1 diabetes, it's really important to retell the bits that aren't so fun and aren't so perfect, because there are so many other people out there going through this, feeling a bit rubbish or wishing they had someone that understood how they felt. I do. I know how you feel. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope you've taken something away from it or just enjoyed my ridiculous tale. I would really appreciate your feedback. If you like this kind of relaxed chat, then let me know. I can do more. I've got more tales. There's more. Diabetes will always offer another ridiculous, embarrassing, undignified incident. There's plenty in the locker. So yeah, let me know. Give it a thumbs up if you have enjoyed it, and please consider subscribing because that would be awesome. And I'll see you next time. Do take care, stay safe, stay well, and I hope you can keep smiling along the way. Lots of love. Bye!